just as a background for everybody listening. The first one is what exactly is our definition about analytics engineering? And I know it's interesting because you were pretty much involved with that part. And the second is what exactly are those skills? But maybe let's start by the definition.
That is actually one of the biggest points we had to tackle during the writing of the book because we started our research and we started looking for definitions already there and what the industry said about analytics engineering. And we saw that everyone has its own definition of what analytics engineering is. And they have subtle differences. And although we agreed with most of them, we thought that we needed to write our own definition that was like tool agnostic and a broader term that defines what an analytics engineer is. So I will read the definition. So for us, analytics engineers are the bridge between business and data engineering. And by adhering to software engineering best practices, they build and maintain robust transformation pipelines to produce high quality datasets. With this process, they improve the accessibility and reliability of data products. The analytics engineer is a center role in empowering end user to make truly data informed decisions. So basically, we find the analytics engineer sitting between the two major roles in data, that is data engineering and data analysts, and it empowers the data consumers of the pipeline. So the data scientists get benefit as well from this role that help to put best practices in place.
Yes. And now that's a perfect bridge. This definition is pretty functional. But let's go back to what you mentioned and tell me what are the skills that an analytics engineer needs?
Well, the analytics engineer has to think differently because uh, I have been working with data engineers, and they are very good of thinking on how to move data in the most efficient way from point A to point B. And then I also have been working with data analysts that they have all these questions in their head of, and they know exactly where the data is, right? So if you ask about profit, they know which tables to look for and where the data lives and what does this means. And usually they are the ones that know the horror stories in the company, like, oh yeah, that table we created because of this and because of that.
Yeah.
But the analytics engineer, I think, has to have the mindset of how to create repeatable and reproducible patterns to move data from one to B in order to not reinvent the wheel every time. How to properly test the data to avoid errors. How to serve the data in a better way. So uh, we used an analogy of a supermarket where if you see the chain for moving the goods to the supermarket, the data engineers would be these trucks that get the produce from the producer to the warehouse, right? They move the product and they say to you, these boxes will arrive at X amount of time, and I make sure that they won't go bad in the way. And then you have the data analysts that sit beside the cashiers and they know how much product has been sold that day and how much profit they have. But then there is one role that is missing in the
Between.
middle. Who is the one that order the food inside the store? Who decides where is the best way to put it so the client can find it easily? Who orders the expiry date products in the front in order to not letting go bad, right? So I think that the analytics engineer is this one that makes things more efficient in the middle. So it facilitates this transition between moving data and serving data.
Yes. And I'm already going to play devil's advocate for the people that are listening to. Many people will say, like, yeah, but that's something that a data engineer does in our organization. And I think we would both agree here that that gap between a data analyst or really any type of data consumer, could also be data scientists, like you mentioned, and data engineers does exist. It's just historically either a very technical analyst or maybe a data engineer that is more willing to collaborate, work with the business, and meet them, we're still doing it. I really think that labor has always existed. We're just now coining a term and appointing a professional to do this particular part that before would fall somewhere else.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the story and the technical advancement has been reshaping this new role because when you had on-premises systems and the database were in your own building and you own them, the data engineer made sure that the datasets were clean, that the datasets were where they supposed to be, and the data analysts were directly to that database and look for the data in there. Now that we move to the cloud, this distance between who moves the data and who serves the data increased, and this bridge is needed now because the data engineering team now has to deal with a lot of platform issues. So I think that the data engineering role is evolving into more like infrastructure as code and this type of solutions that keep things working to move data from A to B. And the analytics side of things also had this evolution where suddenly, because the data engineering team was too full with work, they had to start transforming the data, cleaning their data. You see all of these BI tools, including powerful tools inside them to transform data. So now you find that you have different data models in the BI tool and in the data warehouse and in
Yes.
the raw source, and then you start with the chaos.
Nightmare material.
Yeah, so I believe that this analytics engineering role that sits in the middle was born out of necessity. So it was to put some order in this middle part that now grew in size and grew apart. And if you don't have an analytics engineer, then the data analyst needs to stop doing what he does best to extract knowledge and go into the data warehouse and put some order there,
Yeah.
or the other way around. Maybe your data engineer needs to stop working on the platform and move the products. So
Agree. I started learning SQL because nobody was willing to do a job for me.
yeah, exactly. So I think that it's a natural evolution of the roles, and one of the consequences of changing from transformation, and loading data to extracting, loading, and transforming data. That is one of the chapters of the book, actually, and because we think that it has a big impact on how the data teams are conformed now and the activities that the data professionals need to do.
You mentioned a hot take earlier, which I also think is definitely interesting to mention, and that is you think data engineering is evolving towards platform engineering. Can you elaborate a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I see that the technical challenges are growing on the platform level. So if you are working with the cloud, or you have different vendors, or you have different tools, then the data engineering team have their hands full, making sure all these systems work together, work properly, and that you have enough reliance on those infrastructure to move your data around. But that also means that they have less time to check the quality of the data and go inside the actual data to see what is this about and stuff. More so when you are dealing with files and these files are dumped into a data lake, uh, then it's more difficult to control who can see what and what type of information that is. And even though the data lakes enables data scientists to go into the raw data and get their hands dirty and play with non-transformed data, it also means that you add another governance layer on your data platform. And yeah, it's really easy to go from a data lake to a data swamp and don't know what is there. So I think that the data engineer is evolving into having and maintaining these platforms and infrastructure in a reliable way to make sure that the data goes from A to B without any issue in time.
I'm willing to say that if you ever found yourself asking the business how a business process work, like, hey, can you explain to me how promotions are calculated or how the returns are done here or what happens when somebody picks up the product? If you ever find yourself asking those types of things to the business and translating them into SQL, regardless of your job title, I think you might be an analytics engineer.
Oh, that is a really good take on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is one of the things I really like about data modeling, because one of the first stages of it is exactly understanding the business, understanding what you do to bring value, and then translating that into actionable code to transform your data. And yeah, I didn't thought of it like a direct one to one, but yeah, now that you mention it, I also recognize that.
Yeah, at least to me, it's a little bit about getting your hands dirty and interacting with people.
Yeah, for sure. And uh, I've seen other like other media or other type of blogs or podcasts talking about data that recognize this analytics person, this analytics professional that is tech savvy, or that it's more technical than the um, average analyst, data analyst. And yeah, I think that if you find yourself creating dashboards, but you have to transform your data, clean your data, and transform this business insight into actionable code, then you can also think yourself as an analytics engineer.
So, yes, you're probably not an analyst anymore.